I wonder if we can say now that the duck face has been replaced with the O face.
Start the game already!
Kapla.
This is a ridiculous bottle opener, but it's the only thing this is good for. Beer. It's
What are you drinking?
the last of my Landshark beers.
Hmm.
I have some gin just in case I run out of beer, which I am going to. If I have to, I can, take my knife across the street, wave it around until somebody gives me alcohol. Because that's the thing you should do if somebody's threatening you with a strange-looking weapon. Give them alcohol, maybe they'll go away. So, what have you got?
I have Queen Street 501. It's Brickworks Cider House. And I have some Ironwood Cider House. I've never seen this stuff before. It's a Caribbean lime cider. Ciderita.
Okay. Doing
Canadian.
different? Give it a try.
Yeah.
It'll probably do the job.
So how are things, man?
Pretty good. Been getting some work done around the house. Obviously, I'm not unpacked yet. Everything's still in boxes. But I put up a barbecue shelter today so I can barbecue in the rain and the snow, which is coming any day now. I mean, it's mid-July. Should snow anytime. I fixed the door on the back screened-in porch, which hasn't closed in I don't know how many years. So, yeah. How about you? What have you been up to?
Not a heck of a lot. It was kind of a busy week. Managed to sneak out and see Oppenheimer today, though. It was pretty good.
And you would recommend this movie?
Yeah. I have some thoughts on it. So it'll probably take me a while to digest. And you have to keep in mind that like we're watching it, it's through the lens of a biopic on Oppenheimer, right? So it's not a World War II movie. It's not a Manhattan Project movie per se. I mean, that's a big part of it. And it's going to sound funny knowing that the movie's like a 3-hour movie, but there's some things that I kind of wanted more of.
Oh, that's
And
strange in a 3-hour movie.
yeah. And I think that maybe I'm wrong,
Oh,
but I have a feeling that we've now reached that tipping point where the average person in the audience is so disconnected from what actually went on
oh
during
yeah.
the world wars that some things that you would assume probably should be explained now. Like if you're going to go back and explain, the Battle of Hastings, or if you're going to go back and explain, um,
Like the 100 Years War, the War of the
yeah, or the
Roses.
Greco-Persian Wars, or whatever. Like you have to explain the context. And I kind of think that
Yeah.
while Nazis and Hitler are pop culture things, and certainly the words come up in everyday conversation now,
Oh, every day. Yeah.
but it has almost nothing to do with what was really going on there. And I think that's um, part of it is I've been re-listening to a bunch of Dan Carlin stuff, and he did one episode. He called it Logical Insanity, but basically it sort of explored the topic in the context of how human beings could make the decision to drop the bomb. And you
Hmm.
can't understand what goes into that decision until you know what decisions they'd already made and what the circumstances were.
Yeah.
Things like, hey, we were already firebombing major cities in Japan and doing arguably more damage and racking up greater death tolls
Yeah.
than the bomb. And how do humans, rational human beings, go from point A to brushing off war crimes is just, you know,
We're just doing it.
yeah, just
Yeah.
this is how operations work. And to touch on the development, the Manhattan Project and the development of that stuff, and not touch on some of the bigger picture stuff, felt like just something that was kind of missing to really understanding the movie and the people in the movie. Like, just to throw an example out there, and I know this was Oppenheimer, so we're not, again, we're not exploring in depth all of these other side characters, but they did show that sort of famous scene where Oppenheimer meets, and this is after the war, um, meets Harry Truman in the White House, and this is after Truman's already made the decision to drop the bomb, and that's happened, and he Oppenheimer talks about feeling like he had blood on his hands, and Truman basically just gives it to him at that point because he made the decision. And then as Oppenheimer leaves, Truman saying to his aide or whoever it was, like, don't let that crybaby in here again.
Hmm.
But they'd never show Harry Truman, the VP slash former hat salesman that inherited the job when Roosevelt died, to show the contrast of what, how crazy that period in time was, and how much it made people crazy. So I don't know. I think that was kind of missing. Like, it really focused more on the Red Scare stuff, which is kind of appropriate to what
Yeah.
happened to Oppenheimer and his story, than it did on Nazis, developing their own nuclear program, and the Pacific War and any of that. So everything just kind of lacked context. So you see all of these things, like scientists and politicians and stuff, celebrating after the Trinity test without understanding why a large portion of those people think this might be a good thing. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen the movie, so I can't really
No.
comment. I did watch Red Letter Media's review of it, which they did a really good job actually of not really spoiling anything,
Mhm.
which honestly, you know what? It's the story about a guy who's, it's like from the 40s, like it's 100 years ago. There really shouldn't be any surprises in there if you've been paying attention. But um, I have to wonder about because so this is something that crossed my mind when you brought up the idea that Hitler and Nazis are part of everyday conversation now. Uh, a comic that I saw at one point about how like pirates are now a thing that kids go out as on Halloween. Like, hey, good pirates share and hug their friends and stuff. And it's like, well, no, that's kind of what we see them as now. Like we see the Pirates of the Caribbean, and we see pirates, kids playing pirates as Halloween costumes and stuff like that. And it's fun and cute, and it's just people with eye patches and funny hats. And I think we're living through the transition of, because if you look at the way that Hitler is portrayed in a lot of sort of modern pop culture literature, right?
Mhm.
He's a cartoon.
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of the sort of weight about how awful the regime that he presided over was.
Mhm.
And I don't think that any of us living now, because I mean, obviously, I don't remember that. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Mhm.
Uh, like we cannot understand what that time was. And I guarantee you that there are a large number of people, especially in North America, who look at that kind of thing and like I mean you see people carrying signs around that say Hitler was right, and like no, he
Yeah.
was 100% wrong about everything. But like are we at the point where, hey, this has become a just a cartoon now and it's just shorthand for evil, but not really evil? And it makes me wonder, like, what is the, like, how I guess the question, the meta question is like, how long does it take before, like, is it too soon? Like, what is too soon?
Yep.
Is it not too soon anymore? I mean,
Yeah.
in
I
my
don't
mind,
know.
it's still too soon.
And I probably will refer to Dan Carlin a couple of times here, but he did another sort of exploration on the idea that, like, somebody someday is going to write an honest book, not, a book that's meant to just get a lot of attention, but an
Mhm.
honest book exploring all the ways that Hitler was actually good, and that Nazis were good because of things that happen in the world as a result of their actions, and contrasting it with we went through a phase where a lot of people tried to overcorrect on the messaging around the Mongols. And, they talk about how, they created trade networks that connected Asia and Europe and all the positive things that happen as a result of that, because the bodies are cold and the millions and millions and millions of dead are now nameless for
Yeah.
a large percentage of the population of the world. And the general consensus is like you'll get your nut job books, but you won't get your earnest explorations of the positivity of Hitler and Nazism for a while yet, because the wound's still fresh. But if we've already turned him into a cartoon character, so you can clearly see that we've kind of made that progress in that direction. And I guess that's why I kind of feel like movies that are like this, that are attempting to sort of, okay, there's obviously license taken in a lot of the stuff that's portrayed on screen, but it's a reasonably earnest attempt to portray facts in a way that your audience can absorb them, even if you're having to simplify things or whatnot. But I do think we almost have to explore those things and just not assume, when somebody hears Nazis or Hitler, they really get how that made people feel at the time. And this movie, like I say, they started really pushing the Red Scare stuff and leading into sort of McCarthyism and whatnot, more than they focused on, ooh, the Nazis are building the bomb. Like that was the first 5 minutes of the movie, and then they really didn't touch on it again.
Well, the thing is, like the way that the history rolled out, and I'm going off my memory here, which is
Hmm.
extremely hazy, is that like they started the development of it, and then basically Germany was defeated
Hmm.
before the Trinity test even happened.
Yeah.
So, like it's like the Nazis are building the bomb, and then they get most of the way there, the math is complete or whatever, and it's like, well, who cares? Like Germany doesn't matter anymore. Like they're done
Hmm.
at this point. It's like how do we stop?
Yeah, and they explore that a bit in the movie. The hey, do we stop the program now because the reason that we started has disappeared? And that's part of that whole logical insanity sort of idea that led to uh, decision makers making the decision to drop the bomb, is the idea that you can rationalize war crimes if by ending 150,000 lives, let's just throw a number out there, you're saving 300,000 lives in the long term by avoiding having the
Uh,
Second World War turn into the First World War, where it was just a years and years long meat grinder, right?
yeah, I mean, it's tough to like. That's a decision that I hope that no one ever has to make
Hmm.
again. But it is like it's a tough decision because it's not simple math. Like these are people you're talking about,
Yeah.
and you can
But you and
see
I
like
couldn't make that decision right now because we aren't there,
right.
like the context of everything sort of mattered, and they really just avoided all of that. Like they
Uh,
just a brief sort of mention of firebombing Tokyo and sort of the number of deaths there, but they didn't really, oh well, we can do the same thing with one device, and it'll force them to surrender. That's about all we got. So I don't know that a large percentage, or a large enough percentage of the audience,
no, I think based
probably
on the
has
trailers
enough
too.
detail out of the context. That's all.
I think a lot of the people going to the movie based on the trailer were probably expecting like a Michael Bay movie.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a lot of Christopher Nolan stuff has been different.
Hmm.
This still had the you watched Interstellar, yeah?
No,
Oh.
no, no. I've missed out on an awful lot of movies in the last few years just from time, mostly. My pop culture references are dated at best.
and
Huzzah!
selfishly, I should probably say that it would have been a little bit nicer to even just pay lip service to how large the Manhattan Project was. Like they talk
Yeah,
about establishing, Los Alamos and a couple of other spots, Chicago and whatnot in the States without even mentioning. And again, you're not going to get into, oh, hey, we're building a town up north in Ontario called Deep River
Chalk
because
River.
Chalk River was the facilities, right? But the town Deep River was built
Well, okay,
during
this
that time.
okay, so for full disclosure for everybody who's
Yeah, yeah,
listening, I live in Deep River and I work at Chalk River. So,
yeah,
yeah, and the site was part of kind of the Manhattan Project established at that time. Chalk River is it's complicated, and my apologies to anyone who's local who actually knows the history because it's I'm going to get this wrong. But sort of kind of what happened was there was a town at the place where Chalk River was, and they moved it down the road to what is now Deep River. In addition to that, in order to house the scientists, engineers, technicians, laborers, and all of that stuff, they actually brought a decommissioned. I don't know. Anyway, like a bunch of houses, like they literally picked them up from a military base and dropped them in town, and that is the town of Deep River. Um, so yeah, like Deep River didn't exist. They sort of made it to support that part of the project. But there was a town here called Chalk River that
yeah,
was in a slightly different location. And then when they built the plant, for the longest time, actually the fiction was that it was a rubber plant. Like it was they made tires there or something like that.
yeah. Now it was they. Oh man, I don't remember the history. You probably know it better. So there was a research program in Montreal called the Montreal something. I think that
Uh
actually had relocated to Chalk
I
River, which kind of
I
kicked things off there.
don't remember. I mean,
Yeah,
I know I had a little thing during orientation where they told us the stuff, and I was, to be honest with you, I was zoned out.
no.
I mean, I had been working out west for like a year and a half. I was exhausted.
Anyway, Chalk River, Deep River is kind of like, and there was another one in BC too, but it's sort of our own little Los Alamos type situation. So watching them build the town of Los Alamos in this movie to house the families and whatnot
Yep.
of all these scientists and personnel, like it would have been cool if even just a one liner saying, hey, we've got these popping up all over the place. Just to sort of communicate the scope. And hey, selfishly, because you live in the area, it would have been neat to get a
Yeah.
reference. Where are
Yeah.
you getting this uranium from? You know?
Yeah, but that's another thing that happens about like there's a lot of misinformation that happens about what happened in World War II because right like where do we learn about that? We learn about it from the movies. Who makes the movies? Hollywood makes the movies, and Hollywood is in America, and it's like it's patriotic thing. It's like let's tell America's story in World War II, but it
Hmm.
was a world war. Like everybody was there.
Yeah.
I mean,
Like
did
the
they did
British were a like decent contributor to the Manhattan Project as well. Like,
yep. Yeah. Yeah, there was lots and lots of people working on that. The Americans had the money. That was America's biggest contribution to World War II actually was just money because they had a functioning economy at that point and pretty much no one else did. Oh, anyway, history is complicated. People are complicated. The social factors of the war with Japan at that point would have been like impossible for 1940s Western civilization to even deal with, right? Because I think, and my understanding of Japanese culture is minuscule at best, but the little bit that I do understand suggests that like a Japanese surrender was an unlikely scenario. So,
mhm.
I mean, at that point, what do you do? Right? It's like either we go at each other in a meat grinder for the next 50 years, or this. I mean, is it right? No, it's probably one of the least wrong answers to the question. Right? I don't
And
think there were any.
that's that logical insanity sort of component that it
Yeah.
would have been. It would have just made a lot of what we saw towards the end of this movie just a little bit less cartoonish. You know,
Ah. Yeah.
that's all. Like you just oh, they're taking the bomb and running with it, and they haven't learned any lessons from it, and they're immediately looking at hydrogen bombs afterwards and sort of plowing into that, despite recommendations from Oppenheimer and stuff not to develop that program. Like they didn't flesh that out. Like the most we got really was just the almost cartoonish. And I'm not saying it's even unrealistic because it was pretty cartoonish. I understand back in the day, anti-commie sentiment where like you
Oh
just
my lord. It still
you're
exists.
oh yeah, absolutely. But just the the like not trusting your neighbors are commie, the people down the streets are commies, just
Hmm.
how distrustful everything was. But that is a result of sort of the context of all the shit that was going on. Like,
Yep,
it's aside from killing a lot of people, I mean, war really changes societies,
it does.
you know?
It
Uh,
does.
Take a country like the United States that just strictly speaking doesn't get involved in foreign affairs and turns them into what they are today, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah, well, actually, no, yeah, what they are today, fair enough.
Hmm.
Like the it's funny to me, like, and I only probably I kind of knew this, but it only really sort of became part of my everyday conscious thinking a couple of years ago. Like Banana Republic, right? It's a store at the mall, but it was actually a thing
Hmm.
that, like American businessmen got military forces to take over countries literally to grow bananas. And the idea that like commercial and financial forces do that, and that people can, like small groups of people can like make that kind of thing happen, is a little bit frightening and disturbing as an idea.
And that's why half the bananas you see in your grocery store still have a little Chiquita logo on it.
Yeah. And they all come from cloned monoculture bananas. Like wild bananas no longer exist.
Yeah.
Anyway, this has been a frightfully, really pop culture laced reference, lighthearted, nerdy discussion.
For context, we're doing this show. We're recording it not too long after we recorded our last show, and our show doc is basically empty. So we're just winging it.
Yeah, this is all off the cuff. But
So
yeah,
what sort
it's even less scripted than usual.
so what sort of cheerfully nerdy thing would you rather talk about?
Oh my god, almost anything. I was thinking about something. I was thinking about something the other day, and I mean, it was another sort of like deep and philosophical discussion. So even if I could remember what it was, I wouldn't bring it up. But um, I was looking at something the other day. I scroll through Reddit a lot, which, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't, because Reddit has become a cesspool of horrible negativity. There are some moments of lighthearted wonderfulness, but there's lots and lots of just, oh my God, is humanity really this bad? But
I'm going
one
to
of the
do it.
things that popped up was
I'm
a
going to interrupt
screenshot.
you. I'm going to interrupt you.
Uh oh.
It's an excuse to play it. Do you remember, and this is just a one sentence interruption. Do you remember when the internet was this innocent thing that we would
Oh.
interact with and almost trust implicitly?
Yeah, there was. Okay, so I'm going to reference H Bomber Guy here, because I tell you what, he's covered everything that's important to me about the internet. Um, was it? Was it? I think it was him. Anyway, somebody made a big long video about why Wikipedia is bad. I think it was him. And it was basically the idea that like Wikipedia is wonderful. Like it's a single source to go and look at a whole bunch of stuff, but you don't get the depth of analysis you used to get. Like, do you remember GeoCities pages where
Mhm.
you go and there'd be like somebody has made a page about, oh, I don't know, like the second episode of original Star Trek. That's the whole page, right? But it is this one person who has done this incredibly in-depth sort of. No, it wasn't. It was JJ McCullough, who's a political commentary dude out in
Mhm.
BC. I would recommend watching him. I disagree with him about almost everything, but he's very articulate in the discussions that he has. So he's worth a watch. And he was talking about like what Wikipedia has the information, but there used to be all these individual pages, and that because they were individual, like one person was really focused and did deep sort of research on this one subject, and you could trust it. And I'm pretty sure the internet was always for porn. You know, that's the way it was. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Reddit. So I I was scrolling through and somebody had posted, here's a screenshot I took in Cyberpunk. And I'm like, oh, I want to go. I want to go. One of the things that I actually really enjoyed about Cyberpunk, and actually I enjoyed this about Horizon Zero Dawn as well. Fuck Ted Farrow. Um, where like just wandering around to try and get a neat screenshot. I wonder if I can. I have a Cyberpunk. Where do the screenshots go for Cyberpunk? Do you remember?
Depends on what you're screenshotting them with. I think you're
Like
probably playing the
inside
Steam
Cyberpunk.
version, right?
Yes.
So it's possible they're going into your Steam folder for it instead of,
Oh yeah.
yeah, this is probably somewhere in your app data directory if it isn't in your Steam folder.
Well, let's have a look at that. You talk about something for a minute. And I'll see if I can find the screenshot and if I can share it.
All right. Well, I'll go back to remember when the internet was innocent? It's funny because porn's probably like the safest, most wholesome place on the internet now.
I Pornhub actually has some really not that I watch Pornhub, but I've seen some comments posted on Reddit, and it's like like people are actually being supportive of each other, and I'm
Yeah.
like, this is really wholesome on a a video about something nasty.
So you probably remember a time when you were, so this would have been before like even you and I met. Back in the ICQ days and some of the early sort of Yahoo fan groups days, where you'd be online and then you'd just get a random fan person or whatever, just like messaging you just out of the blue. And like now, if that happens, it'd just be instant ignore, instant,
Oh,
block, instant whatever.
Russian spam bot.
Yeah. But back then, it's like, ooh, an interesting person wants to talk to me. And you would engage with it. And like, I'm sure there were many instances of catfishing and all kinds of stuff going on like that. But like, I
Oh yeah.
have not people that I speak to regularly anymore, but like people that I made like established sort of online friendships with that carried on for decades afterwards,
Yep.
you know?
Do you remember Chronicles of George?
Yes.
Chronicles of George is still up. The keeper of the Chronicles, actually, I think the last I heard, he was actually working in the data center at NASA. So I'm halfway through my first beer, so my words are going to start becoming slurred and shaky. But I read Chronicles of George. I still can't. I'm like on ticket 3, and I'm literally laughing so hard I can't read anymore because there's tears streaming out of my eyes. But there was a website. Or sorry, a chat board. It was Apache BB something something.
Yeah.
The heck, the theme was silver. I remember that, but like there was just a bunch of people who got together and talked about the Chronicles of George. And I mean, I was a part of that community for years and years. I still like I can still log in. Like I still have a user account there. I just haven't looked in forever. But yeah, I mean, like they like friendships formed and for a long, long time. That was yeah. The internet used to be good, kids.
There was a brief window. It lasted about 3 years.
Yeah. Before everybody got on it. You know what? I have this theory that as soon as enough people get involved, there's like a critical mass of people where everything turns to shit. Yeah. I think.
Yeah. And it's not even just the early internet. Like I almost long for that sort of even pre-internet, like BBS kind of small community thing. Like I think if I were to wake up tomorrow and big social media platforms just disappeared, I'm not sure how ready a lot of people that are kind of exhausted by this would be to just jump on the new one or the next one. Like
I think
I know a lot of,
given the excuse to stop, I think a lot of people would just stop.
yeah, but I think if you could find these niche communities again, random blogs or
Yeah.
random forums, like fuck Reddit, even, like
Yeah.
random forum about a very particular niche subject, and there's like a hardcore community of 30 people there,
Even
reasonably
if
like-minded, not trolly.
there's a sort of critical mass where a small town becomes not a small town anymore. And I mean, my small town is relatively unique because we have like we're probably more multinational than Toronto. Right? It's a funny thing because I mean we recruit scientists from all over the world. Uh, but it still has a small town feel. And I remember reading a study one time. Well, the summary, no, the title basically of the summary of a study. I did read a little bit of it, but it was about like when does a community get too big to be sort of like that small town community feel, right? Like at what point when your neighbor walks over and says, "Hey, my lawnmower broke, can I borrow yours?" do you say no, fuck off? And it turns out that once a community reaches a size of about 5,000, it stops being like a small town and becomes a city where you don't interact with your neighbors. Like today, we had some carpets that were in storage uh, when we were living in the apartment, and like they've been rolled up for 2.5 years now. So I unrolled them on the driveway just to see, like, are they full of mouse droppings? Are they, is the body still in the carpet? So I rolled them out of my driveway and I'm sweeping them. And the neighbors from across the street just wandered over and said, "Hey, you're new to the neighborhood. Like, how long you been here? Like, what's your deal? How you doing? What are you doing for the long weekend? We're having a barbecue. You want to come over?" Right? And that's something that, like, I mean, does that happen in the city? Like, I never had that experience even in like Belleville and Trenton, which are not that big.
No. No, and I don't know. Um, like you have to be big enough that not everybody knows everybody,
Yeah.
right? Like you get those small communities where everybody knows everybody, and that's kind of great, but that comes with its own drawbacks. And then you have like the size of community you're in where there's like just friendly strangers,
Yeah.
and that's neat.
Yeah. It is nice. This is, you know what? I did have an idea for a thing that I wanted to do, and it's a like another segment or something. I don't know what to call it. I don't know, maybe good news or something, but just to say something positive about like something that happened today, something that went well, something that, gives you hope for the future, whatever it is. It's just like, I don't know, positive vibes. And for me, like that's my thing, is that today my neighbors from across the street just wandered over and said hello. And it was not tense. Like, we're from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Like, their house is like massive, brand new, and they cut their lawn on a diamond pattern, right? Like, and they don't cut their grass. They hire someone to cut their grass and to do their lawns, to trim their fruit trees, and to polish the granite stone fronts on their house. But there was no, you know, it wasn't. I mean, it was a little bit awkward because we don't know each other, but it was reasonably comfortable that they just came over and said, "Hey, we're your neighbors from across the street," and it was nice.
Well, shout out neighbors.
I love my neighbors. Uh,
Speaking of, you read a title to a summary to an article to a study or something. Do you still use Slashdot at all?
what now? No.
Speaking of communities that have just like digressed into a shithole,
Oh,
I miss old school Slashdot. I think we probably both had like uh 4-digit, like probably earlier mid 4-digit user numbers way back in the day.
I don't even remember Slashdot, man. Like, the
Really?
the the name rings a vague bell, and I think I was there, but like I did a lot of drugs back in the '60s.
Asshole. You're old, you're not that old.
Yeah, there was a thing that somebody there was a poster that somebody put up at school when I was in high school, and it was like an actual literal poster that they had written with markers because this was well before the internet. Uh, and it would literally had one thing on it. There's a big heading that said, "How many of our teachers were at Woodstock?" And then there was a subheading, "How many of them are still there?" uh, Fun fact: people who were at Woodstock are probably in their 70s now.
A lot of them. A lot
Well,
of them are dead.
well, yeah.
It's crazy how
So,
long ago that was. Like, it was basically yesterday and also incredibly long ago when you think
well,
of just how
yeah,
much has happened in the world since then.
50 some years ago. Yeah, it's weird to me that a lot of like the people who were sort of involved. Well, I mean, like Bernie Sanders was at Woodstock, um, and so that's about the right age, right? And you think about like how many of the people of that generation who were like protesting the war in Vietnam and like protesting all kinds of stuff and free love and all of this stuff, and like, what did they do to the world? Like, wow. Yeah. So,
So
but
here's a
yeah,
thought that'll make you feel old.
uh-oh.
We're rapidly approaching the tipping point where the time that has passed between Woodstock 99 and today is more time than the time between Woodstock and
Oh,
Woodstock 99.
Woodstock 99 was a bust.
Oh, absolutely. But,
Yeah.
that's something that feels like basically yesterday to me.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of the time passing and how weird that feels like as you start to get older and how much like when I think about sometimes like, oh yeah, I remember that thing that I did in my 20s 30 years ago, damn near.
Hmm.
Like that's crazy. Right? Like I mean when we met at Stream, I was in my mid 20s and that was a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I was like
12.
20, maybe just turning 21.
Yeah. It was a long time ago. We grew up, man. Well, we grew
Well,
old.
we grew old. Yeah. Out maybe, but not up.
Out. Oh man. Spent a lot of time on my feet in the last few weeks, and I'll tell you what, getting out of bed these days, the first few steps out of bed is like, oh, feet don't work. Feet don't work. It's yeah.
So now that you have this room to yourself, what plans do you have for it?
Well, I had some major plans until the giant piece of furniture over my left shoulder here was foisted on me. I don't know if that's the right word. It was more or less, I was voluntold that I was taking this piece of furniture in this room because there's nowhere else in the house that it really goes. And it's handy because it's got lots of drawers and I could put, cables and wires and stuff in there. But I had planned on turning that entire wall into like bookshelves and just filling it with interesting and nifty books. So my library plans have been somewhat turned down. I'm probably going to put the MP3 player in the corner over there. I've told you the story about the MP3 player, right?
Probably, but I don't remember it.
So back when Tiger Direct was still a thing, I was going to work at West. I was flying back and forth every 10 days, and I wanted to get an MP3 player, right? Yes, my phone would do those kinds of things, but I mean the battery life on a phone is not that great. You know, I didn't have a great phone, so I thought I'll get an MP3 player. They're cheap, so I ordered one. I think it was $39.
Hmm.
Um, And we got a phone call like 3 days later to say, is somebody going to be home to receive this MP3 player? To which, my wife said, yeah. Okay. Do you have a parking lot where we can bring the truck in? Uh, yes. So they showed up with a pallet, right? Like 40 by 48 pallet with this giant box on it, right? And I said to the guy who's delivering it, like, can you help me carry this thing down the stairs? And he says, well, I'm not really supposed to, but I mean, sure. It was only for like 5 steps, but there's no way I could do it myself. So we carried it downstairs, and it was like 5 feet high by like 30 inches by 30 inches. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? So I open it up. It's a server tower, like it's a server rack, like a good one. And I'm like, like, what do I do with this? Like, do I call them and like like it says MP3 player and I've signed for it. Like I've received it. And I mean, and I have never done anything with it other than like just put stuff in it, but I'm going to put it over there and like fill it up with, I don't know, antique computer junk or something. But the funny thing is that like 2 days later, my MP3 player showed up in a little box coming through the mail. Okay.
I've never heard that story. That is bizarre.
I was absolutely bonkers. I mean, it was very close to when Tiger Direct went out of business. So I think it was probably somebody just going, hey, whatever, ship people stuff. Who cares? Because I did call them and say, look, you sent me this thing, and like, what do you want me to do with it? Like, do I need to send it
Ah,
back? And they were like, we have no record of you having, like, it doesn't exist. I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'll just keep it then.
that's bizarre. And it had like your name on the
Oh yeah,
yep.
yeah. It had the right order number on it. I just got 2 things on that order number, one of which came on a truck, and one of which came in the mail because it was like this big. uh,
That's hilarious.
yeah.
So you mentioned books.
Uh-huh.
I've told you before that I want to start reading more again. Like I used to just eat books
Me too.
back in the day, and I haven't. But I've also hit that sort of tipping point where like I used to like books. I'd have bookshelves filled with books, and now they're basically at the bottom of my stairs going into the basement, and they haven't been touched in 15 years. So I'm at the point where I'm like, oh, well, you know what? I'm just not going to get books anymore, but I want to get a decent sort of e-ink kind of ebook reader.
Yep.
But I keep waffling. Are you pro now that you have a house that has a little space? I assume your opinion on this has changed a little bit, but are you still pro physical book?
Um, yes and no. I think that both have their. This is one of those things where I disagree with everyone on the internet because I don't think that there is one best solution.
Mhm.
I think that there's a solution that fits every individual a little better than others. I enjoy holding a book, but I'm starting to get arthritis in my hands, so sometimes holding books for a long period of time is a little uncomfortable. I have an older version of a Kindle. Uh, if I could buy a Kindle from someone who wasn't Jeff Bezos, I would because Jeff Bezos is evil. Hi YouTube. Um, I just assume that he owns everything now. Uh, but I really really like it. Like I like being able to go. All right, I'm not going to wear my glasses to read. I'm just going to make the text bigger. Um, but at the same time, there's something nice about holding like a book with a nice thick cover and
Mhm.
actually turning pages. I do find like for technical references, a physical book is actually better because I can go, oh, I'll just flip back 2 pages and I'll put my finger in this page
Mhm.
and reference somewhere else in the book. Pardon me, and then I can sort of flip back and forth. But I'm pro dead tree books because they're nice, but I'm also anti dead tree books because they're dead trees. Right? We don't have enough of those. So, I'm waffling too. Of all of the, because I've had a couple of different things to read ebooks with, and honestly, the Kindle is the best one. Just is. I don't think
Yeah.
color is necessary, but it is just a nice device.
Yeah, no, I've never had a proper e-reader. Like I've used my phones and some shitty tablets and stuff. And the big thing with those is like you can't read out in the sunlight very well, and
Yes,
batteries
Kindle's
don't
great for
last.
that.
Yeah, and I've looked at some of the Kobos. Is it the
Uh,
you know I kind of like the idea of something that I can just load like my own EPUB files on easily without having to deal with bullshit.
You can do that with the Kindle.
Can you?
Um, yeah, it has its own specific thing, which is like an AZW file or an
Mm.
AZW file if you're um, unable to speak English.
Yeah,
Um,
because well, you know me, my stance on piracy versus fair use. I don't object to paying for something. I prefer to only pay for it once. And a lot of the books I read electronically are books I already own on paper. And I want the convenience factor. And
Sometimes
while I could
twice.
buy it, yeah, while I could buy it again, I could also just get an EPUB for it. Like,
Yeah. So the specific file for the Kindle is literally just I forget which format it is, but it's basically one
mhm.
of the EPUB files with like an extra.
Yeah, I just thought it had some native DRM built into it that, like, if you loaded it on, it would attempt to check ownership against whatever the Kindle store shit is or whatnot.
It
I've never
might.
used one, so I'm probably wrong.
Ow! Ow! Sorry, you probably couldn't see that, but that was my cat deciding he wanted my attention. He was going to dig into my shoulder until he got it.
Kevin?
Yeah, that's Kevin.
Hey, Kevin.
Kevin has been freaking out because the house is too big. Can't find the other end of it. Gets lost because he's a little bit dumb, aren't you? Come here. Come on. Here. Oh, this is Kevin. He is
Hello,
orange
Kevin.
and he's huge. Say hello to the people, Kevin.
It's not quite as chonky as our ginger, but it's got a little bit more muscular looking face, so he carries his weight a little better. Our guy's just a sausage.
Kevin is not as floofy as he used to be. We have stairs now, so he's been running up and down them for a couple weeks.
So have you paid any attention to the Baldur's Gate 3 stuff?
No, I was reading something about like 5e versus Baldur's Gate 3 and they've done this and that and I'm like, what have they actually done? Like what's happening? So, give me the TLDR.
I mean, I've avoided most of the pre-release kind of early access stuff. I think I'm going to buy it. I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit it in kind of like day one or not, but like it looks insanely impressive. So it's not BioWare, it's Larian who did the Divinity Original Sin games.
Okay.
And they got some controversial kind of uh press in the past couple of weeks with one of their teaser trailers. It was about romance stuff. And the one cutscene they showed was the prelude to a sex scene essentially between a character and a druid in bear form. Of course, the
ah,
internet erupts, and it was just,
uh,
I mean, it was funny because it's just like, oh, it looks like they're going to get it on. And then they just pan up to this squirrel in a tree that like drops a nut. Just, and it was basically
that's
at that point that I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm in. I'm in because, they get it. Like,
that's
it's not, I'm
funny.
not in it for the bear sex. I'm in it that, like that is,
You're not in it for the bear sex, but you're not against it.
no, I'm in it for the people that, that get it. Like, that's the dumb shit that would happen at a table, right? With the
Yes.
right players. And um like I don't really have a ton of experience with the older Baldur's Gate games. I played through Baldur's Gate 2 way back in the day. I skipped one and then tried to get back into it, and I got like 6 hours
Oh,
into it and I'm like, nope.
oh,
But
so I'm looking through my screenshots here, and I'll tell you what, some of them yeah. Like I've got some from Horizon Zero Dawn. I haven't been able to find any of the. Oh, that's hilarious. That one actually took the UI. I haven't been able to find any of the Cyberpunk ones, and all of these ones have the friggin' UI on them. Oh, I'm gonna have to go and find these spaces again and try and figure out how to take a screenshot
Well,
without the UI.
Cyberpunk has a proper photo mode, I believe.
Yeah, so does Horizon Zero Dawn. But for some reason, it like it's taken all of these photos with the UI. That's terrible. So this is, let me see if I can actually share that. Share. I can only share my screen.
No, I'm sure it's
Oh wait,
riveting
nope.
for all the users,
Oh
all the
yeah.
listeners.
So here's the thing.
Okay.
If you can on that, but like it just stuff like this, things where there's this, here's this vista, and you can see all the stuff, and there's a bunch of those that I took in Cyberpunk, where it was like just cruising around trying to find interesting places to take pictures is kind of fun.
Hmm. And well, I mean, shameless plug, but some artwork up there of mine from Horizon Zero Dawn, some Mass Effect artwork over here from mine. Um, Artwork created strictly because I'm inspired by doing that kind of stuff. And my process, I wouldn't call myself overly creative, but it's akin to like artists back in the day that would stage a fruit bowl and then make a painting, like getting inspiration from exploring games and finding these neat vistas and just sort of neat sort of vignettes or slices of the game, and trying to recreate the vibe in my own style is something that I've been doing. Hashtag not sponsored. Nerd Nerdflea.co if you're interested in, or you can find me on Etsy. Episode 10. Hey, we've made it here. I think we're probably official. I'm allowed to start shamelessly plugging shit now, right?
I mean, probably. I mean, guess. I'm not sure how much good it's going to do you. Like, I have absolutely no problem with you doing that. I'm thinking to myself, I'm not sure it's even
I've
worth the effort.
I've told less people about my podcast than I've told about my art shit. So
uh,
no, that's my mission this week. Actually, I want to start sharing things. We're officially at episode 10. We're just making shit up and winging it this episode, so it's probably not the best example of things that they would get listening to us. But I'm going to start strong arming people I know to check it out.
yeah. Well, I mean, I guess we have enough material in the can for people to come and tell us we suck, right?
Yeah, that's what friends are for.
Yeah.
So we've got a few. I'm going to skip over retro replay stuff. Did you have any table talk stuff you wanted to talk about?
I haven't. Yeah, there's been nothing. There's been nothing in the last 3 days since we recorded that is worth talking about.
Okay.
Although the Baldur's Gate 3 stuff is sort of interesting in that like it's been a while since Dungeons and Dragons had any kind of uh, like anything in the video game space. I was thinking to myself the other day, like I'd really like to get into Neverwinter Nights because I never finished it. I've never finished Baldur's Gate. I got fairly deep into it, and I had more enjoyment in Baldur's Gate actually in finding little Easter eggy things than I
Hmm.
did in actually playing the game. And I've tried to get back into it again. I have Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition on my computer,
Hmm.
and I load it up every once in a while and try and create a character, and I'm just like, oh my god,
Yeah, I
like
think there's
this
a humble
UI is
bundle out that has like all of the enhanced editions too for Baldur's Gate Icewind Dale.
yeah.
I think there's some Planescape stuff in there.
Icewind Dale was an interesting one because I remember having the CDs, and there was one in Windows 98. I think there was a problem where it wouldn't copy a specific file because that when that file was an input into the copy command in Windows 98, it would actually lock up your computer. Everything else would install except for that one file, and you couldn't copy it. Like literally, copy file name to this destination would lock up your computer. So I had to put the file into a zip file and unzip it into the location it needed to be for Icewind Dale to actually run. And I
That's
remember that
weird.
taking it took me a week to figure that out. And then I played for like 10 minutes and went, yeah, this sucks, and I'm done.
Yeah, I think I liked actually Icewind Dale more than Baldur's Gate. Now, Icewind Dale was Black Isle, wasn't it? Wasn't BioWare. Or was it?
Ah,
I don't remember.
they definitely used the same engine. I
They
remember
did.
that. Yeah, so it very much felt like the same game.
Mhm,
Planescape was another one that was reasonably similar.
mhm.
That I really wanted to like, just couldn't.
All right. Well, we do have some questions from Ian. He's been on the road for a couple of weeks, but made some time to send us some stuff. So let's get into an extended pod bag.
All right.
You've got mail.
All right. First question. I think we've touched on this one before, but I don't think we've specifically answered this. Video games and films have been merging more and more over the past decade. What film do you think should be made into a video game, and what video game do you think should be made into a film?
The crossover is becoming quite noticeable. I find myself a lot of times watching movies and series and thinking to myself, like they've done this specifically to make this sort of scene or feeling or vibe or whatever so that like they can make it into a video game. And I forget the last one I looked at that was like that, but like any of the Marvel stuff sort of strikes me as like this
Hmm.
could be and probably will be made into a video game. And a lot of it's just crossover due to marketing, right?
Hmm.
I would love to see them because a lot of the early Dungeons and Dragons games had strong stories. I would love to see like Baldur's Gate turned into a movie.
Yeah, and I mean the D&D movie that came out this year felt the
Yeah.
part. Like it wasn't
Yes.
Baldur's Gate the movie. It was close to what a Baldur's Gate the movie should feel like.
Yes. It had the proper vibe. I mean, I know a lot of people have sort of shit on the Dungeons and Dragons movie. I think like it was good. I think it had the right vibe, and that was really the thing that Dungeons and Dragons movies have been missing all along. It's just that vibe, that feeling of I could see this happening around my table.
Hmm.
Like all of the jokes landed just the way they're
Yeah,
supposed to. They're
without
corny and
being
they're awful.
overly explicit about it. Like you could have spoon fed that vibe, and it would have been lesser for it. They struck
Yes.
the right balance.
Yeah. Yeah. They did just right.
Uh, no, I've spoken ad nauseum about how much I'd like to see Mass Effect turned into something. I don't think a movie's the right way to go with it. I think a series would be the
Yeah.
way to go, just because it's such a big universe and you want to have an opportunity to explore, you know, even just narrative
Miniseries.
inside it, like a mini series or a treatment like they've done a couple seasons of Last of Us kind of thing, or The Witcher or whatever. Certainly not going to be like a Star Trek kind of multiple episodes, a season for 7 seasons type thing. But one movie I would definitely like to see turned into a video game, and I have to imagine it's going to happen at some point, is the John Wick series. Now, I know
That's
they
where I
made
was
a
going.
John Wick Hex game, which was sort of I've never played it, but my understanding is it was sort of a like one of those pause and playing out your moves. Like you sort of establish your sequence events, and it's sort of a hex based uh, grid
So,
type thing. But then once you sort of created the sequencer planner stuff, then it played in real time, and it kind of had the vibe of like a John Wick scene playing out when you got to see it all happen. But like something that harkens back to like the good Max Payne games or something,
oh yeah.
that just I think, the stuff around John Wick, the universe, the world, the sort of what was subtle-ish underground stuff that just got crazy and silly by, second and third and fourth movies. I think that stuff would be easier to accept in a video game. So there would be an opportunity to explore this really, even if you weren't playing as John Wick, explore this cool culture thing that they sort of established in these movies, the high table, the continentals, all of that kind of shit. Um, just being like, it's very clear that pretty much every second or third person that you see on the street is an assassin of some sort based on the John Wick movies.
Oh
So
yeah.
like you could even turn it into an MMO somehow. But
Oh, a John Wick MMO would be absolutely epic. I mean, terrible, awful, and full of the worst trolley people you can imagine.
oh, absolutely. But like, having these sort of bounties and whatnot go out, like it lends itself to questing.
Yeah,
So I think it could do well, but I think a tight single player game with the feel of a Max Payne, but a little bit more
it would be interesting to have
GTA-ish in terms of like scope, maybe.
it would be interesting to have that kind of a vibe as like a two-player co-op experience. That would be neat.
Hmm. As for games that I'd like to see in the movies besides Mass Effect, that's a tough one. I'm gonna cheat.
Uh-oh.
I want a sequel to, and okay, this movie is terrible, but it's terrible in all the ways that I love. It's a movie that I break out once a year. It's the um, Prince of Persia uh, movie that they did Jake Gyllenhaal back in, I don't know, 2009 ish, maybe.
Should have been good.
It was good. I will die on that hill. Yeah, it was terrible, but it was good. Like it
Okay.
knew what it was. It was just dumb schlocky shit with a charismatic lead, and it was fun.
I mean, I will literally watch Jake Gyllenhaal talk about eating a banana.
Oh, it's
So,
true.
yeah, I mean, yeah, he's a compelling actor, but eh, I only barely remember the movie, and to me, that's kind of dire because it should have been great. It could have been great.
I mean, for its time, honestly, I think it was probably the best video game movie,
Yeah,
you
or
know?
at least close.
I mean, the bar
Yeah, I
wasn't
was.
very high, but
I would really like to see a movie made, and I've never played the game, but I would like to see a movie made of Red Dead Redemption.
mhm.
I mean, just I think the time is ripe for some seriously terrible schlock westerns, turning some of the tropes of westerns of old completely on their heads. I think that would be fun.
That'd be a good mechanism for it, I think.
Yeah.
And they're I mean, I've played a little bit of the second one. I haven't finished it. I didn't have a console to play the first one, but I've seen kids played it, and I've seen enough of it to get it. It would be good. Um, Up until it came out, I would have said the Uncharted games um, would
Yeah,
have
that
been
was
it.
bad.
Oh, it was so bad. Like they could have found the next Indiana Jones in that if they'd have done it right, and they just didn't.
Oh yeah, it was just so bad. So bad.
How is it that you've watched Uncharted, but you haven't watched Interstellar?
It's a question of like what have I got the mental capacity to sit down and watch at the end of the day? Right? Interstellar is one of those things that I would like to it's in potentia I would really love to see the movie, but I need to find a time when I don't sit down because most of the time I don't even watch TV until like this time of night, right? And I don't have like cable or satellite or any of that stuff. We have streaming services. Typically at this time of night I want to sit down and watch something that's the equivalent of mental pablum. Uncharted fills that niche. Interstellar doesn't. I don't watch a lot of movies anymore either, honestly, because at this time, like I'm sitting down to watch. We were watching this series called Car SOS, I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's based in
No.
Britain, and basically what they do is people will write into the show to say like, "Hey, my dad is, he's got this classic car that he really wanted to restore, but he had a heart attack and then mom died, and he's basically just set the thing aside. And I think it would really give him a lift if his car was restored. Will you do it?" And they come and collect the car, and they basically like restore it and sometimes modify it or pimp it up a little bit. And then they do this big reveal where they bring them along and they don't realize that they're about to have their car returned. And then it's like, this is actually your car, right? And it's kind of a tearjerker, but it's also like a really sort of positive thing, because it's not like, hey, give us $100,000 and we'll do a thing for your house or whatever. It's just, we're just
What
going
was
to do
that
this
that home renovation show that did that? Can't
while you
remember.
were
It
out.
was something like that. Yeah, it was really, really popular like 10 years ago.
Yep.
Yeah.
Same vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, it's, I mean, it's 100% good news, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, I bought this thing in 1968 with the hopes of restoring it. And they've done some, like, they did a three-wheel Morgan, which was like from 1940
Wow.
something. Yeah. And it's like, and they show up to get the thing, and it's like, this is not a car. This is like three wheels and a painted sideboard, which is rotted out, and we're gonna have to replace like everything. Like, it's literally like we're keeping the steering wheel and we're building the rest of the car from scratch. But they do a fantastic job, and they do a little bit of like sort of educational stuff about, this is how a carburetor works, and this is what this goes here, and here's a little trick for changing timing belts. Which one of the things that he does that's really really clever is, how, I don't know if you've ever worked on an engine,
Hmm.
but changing a timing belt is really tricky because everything has to stay perfectly in sync. And the traditional method is you make little marks and then you line them up, slide the belt over. So he has this clever thing that what he does is he basically goes around and slices the timing belt in half widthwise, takes the front half of it off, slides the new belt on halfway, cuts the old belt, takes it off, slides it on the rest of the way, and then everything is perfectly synced down to the tooth.
I miss cars that you could work on.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I used to drive stock cars and stuff, and like I grew up with a garage that always had, project cars going on. And I see a lot of the creators on YouTube that I follow, like a lot of the woodworkers and a lot of even the tech guys are starting like sidecar channels where they're doing restorations on miscellaneous stuff. So Jay's Two Cents, the guy whose podcast we were ripping off last show, has a channel where he's doing a 60, was a 67. I think he's starting with a 68 Camaro that he's doing a restoration on.
Oh, yeah, the
Um,
one where you could actually step into the hood with the engine.
yeah, the exact opposite kind of car. Make something. No, I like to make stuff. There's a Carmen Gia restoration going on.
Oh
It's been
man,
like a 1 or 2 year project, and it's super interesting.
that's a
It's
hard car to restore. Finding parts for that is
Oh yeah,
bonkers
yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. But there's something lost in today's cars where like you can't do
Well, they're
anything without.
disposable.
Well, they're disposable, but like they're so locked down, and the technology, the automation stuff. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying old cars are better. Like, we've made in terms of
Yeah,
efficiency and whatnot, like
safety,
safety, everything about new cars is, whether you want to believe it or not, just so much better. But
unbelievably better. The driving experience is so
you
much
know,
nicer in a new car.
like the average user nowadays, like what service can they do to their own car? They rarely change their own oil.
It's hard.
You know,
It's really hard in a lot of new cars.
um, like I still do my own brake work and stuff like that because that's stuff that's still relatively easy if you have
Tools
a
and
little bit of
know-how.
knowledge and you're willing to put the elbow grease in. But there's
I
there's like I used to replacing head gaskets and pulling engines apart and stuff on my own, and now, like,
I just
dude,
don't. It's not worth
I
it.
I look under the hood and I look at, like, count the wiring harnesses, and it's like, nope.
Yeah. No, you'd be 3 weeks just getting to the head gasket.
Hmm.
I stopped changing my own oil, largely because like there's nowhere to dispose of the old oil.
Yeah.
And the difference in price between me doing my own and then having to figure out how to dispose of the oil and paying someone to do it is about $4.
Yeah. Yeah, we I don't change our oil anymore. We just go through one of the drive-through ones basically.
Yep.
Or we do like we still go to the dealership to get like winter tires and stuff, just because I don't really have room to even want to store them. So it's just like, fuck it. You guys keep
Yeah.
them. We have to bring our car in for annual inspections for the electronic anti-rust shit anyway. So it's just like, we'll come here a couple times a year. But brake work and stuff like that, like it's amazing how much money you can save doing that.
Yeah. Our brakes have to be replaced an awful lot up here. It's kind of unfortunate.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to Ian. I enjoyed your discussion of what makes a good leader on your recent episode where you spoke about guild leaders, officers, and raid leaders. Throughout your career, have you run into unconventional leaders, and what set them apart from your typical leader?
Yes. Should we talk about the leadership at Stream?
No.
That's not.
I,
Let's just say it was bad and move on.
yeah. So, man, this is a tough question. Have I run into unconventional leaders? Yes. That doesn't make them good leaders. And one thing I've found now, some of the context here is I've been with the same employer for 15 years now, so I haven't really, dealt with a lot of leaders in the workspace for quite a while now. But I'd churned through a few different industries and call centers and at various sort of levels of management. And you can have a good boss that is a shitty manager. You can have a shitty boss that is a good manager. But very rarely do I ever find somebody that is both. Like
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
I've had some really unconventional sort of people that I've run into that are just like real sort of straight shooters, don't sugarcoat anything. And I found that refreshing. But often they were also a shitty manager, you know?
I I have had exactly one. There's a different. It's important, I think, to make a distinction between leaders and managers, because they are very different. I
Hmm.
came across a talk by Seth somebody. He was one of the sort of founding dudes at Yahoo. He got out of it after. Now he does like public speaking. He's written a bunch of books. Seth Godin, I think that's his name. Where he did a little talk about like what's the difference between leading and managing, and it it was his take on it is kind of interesting. Where he's like, leaders often make terrible managers because leaders are the type of people who have an idea and they drag you along on their idea, but once the idea is up and running, they get bored, like they're done,
Hmm.
right? And they should move on. Like those are the kind of people that you don't want managing.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, if your system's all set up and everything's going as it is, then a manager is someone who just comes in and oversees the day to day stuff, and that is a different skill set.
Hmm.
So the likelihood that you're going to find somebody who's good at both of those is very low. I have had exactly one boss that I would say was good at both when I was working out west. And I mean, speaking to him outside of work, nice enough guy,
Hmm.
He's from the southern U.S. and we disagree on a lot of sort of things. He's from Texas, um, but he was actually a really great person to work for because he was 100% no bullshit.
Hmm.
He would tell you what he wanted, when he wanted it, and he would ask, "Can you deliver that?" And if the answer was no, he would accept that. But I mean, like the pushback basically was like, "What other resources do you need? What is stopping you from delivering that when I
Hmm.
want it?" And if it was like, "I just don't have the information I need, or I don't know how to get there, or I don't have the tools that I need," then he would either connect you with somebody who had the tools or the time, or get you help, or simply say, "Okay, that's an unreasonable ask. We'll do something different." He knew what was going on with the job that we were doing, not so much in the nitty gritty, but he knew the high level stuff. Like I was working as a scheduler on that job, and like there were times when he would say, like, is this done? And I'd have to say, like, I don't know. I'd have to check. And he's like, I think it's done, because he was literally looking at every part of that job every day.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because there were a couple of times. Now that was an odd kind of a situation, because there were so many people who wanted that job. It paid really, really well, that like they didn't do interviews. You didn't interview for that job. You literally said, I'd like to come out and try it. They would hire you. You would come out, you'd work for 2 weeks. And if you were worth keeping on, you got to come back for your next 2 week shift. And if you weren't, you just didn't get another plane ticket. So like all of the people that I was working with were really high caliber people, which was interesting. I was surprised that I made it, to be honest.
Hmm.
Because I was thinking, oh, like here I am, and like this is ridiculous. Like all of these people are really, really good. Like how am I gonna fit in here? And it turns out that, you know what, like high caliber work is what I've been doing all along. I just was never really paid for it. But it was neat because like interacting with this person at work, he was an ogre. Like he was unapproachable. He was like, you just got the impression that you were always wasting his time.
Hmm.
Right? Like he wasn't the kind of guy that wander up to him at the water cooler and go like, "Hey, how's it going?" Like you just didn't do that. And it was interesting, and it was a bit refreshing, because if you had a work problem, you could go to him and say, "I have a problem," and as long as you weren't wasting his time, then he would say, "Talk to so and so about the solution." Like he wasn't going to walk you through the solution. He had too much to do. He was too busy. But he was actually busy. Like he wasn't just pretending to be busy. He was actually busy, because every day he talked to everyone that was working for him, and that was like 40 people, right? Like that's a full day. So that was neat, because I've had, in the same way, going through call centers in various places, I've had lots of bosses who were just terrible, right? Like like the worst thing that I've found is wishy-washy people who are like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings. Like, no, if I'm doing a bad job, tell me I'm doing a bad job and tell me what I can do to fix it.
Hmm.
But, being a leader is hard.
Yeah. And I mean, in that environment, it's not like we really were dealing with leaders. We were dealing with middle management.
It's true. I mean, there's no reason that middle management can't be leaders,
In
but
that environment, I don't, they're not empowered enough to
you have to take the empowerment. You really can't. Nobody's ever going
yeah.
to give it to you. But I mean, like, there's some things that you can't do. Like, you're not going to be able to give people raises. You're not going to be able to change people's shifts. But you can do things like, talk to people and figure out, like, why is this not working? Like, is this the wrong job for you? And if it is, like, I want you to leave. Like, I don't want to fire you. I don't want to get rid of you. I want you to go and do something that will make you feel more fulfilled, right? But nobody does that. Yeah. I have a theory that I have stolen from various places, that leadership is not about authority or power. Um, it's just about like taking care of the people around you. Leadership doesn't necessarily come from above; it comes from all over the place. Well, that looked like it tasted
I'm
interesting.
I'm not sure what I expected, but that isn't it. Caribbean lime cider.
Tastes like apples and limes.
There's not much apple there. It could grow on me.
Okay. Well, I think we've answered Ian's question.
All right. Less serious one. And this one's probably going to take us an hour. A zombie apocalypse is upon us, World War Z style, or Z. You somehow get 48 hours warning of the impending doom. What do you do? Where do you go? And how likely do you think it is that you would survive a week, a month, or a year?
Uh, 50-50, 10%, 0%. 48 hours is not an awful lot of time to do stuff. It depends on what kind of zombies we're talking about. Are we talking about like 1950s slow zombies? Well, I guess World War Z style. So we're looking at fast zombies. Um, I don't know. Like, I have a little bit of a problem with the depiction of zombie apocalypses in most movies.
Hmm.
In that, like, there's only a certain amount of sort of biological material that's available for zombies. Like, what happens to like entropy gets to everything eventually,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you're not going to have like zombies don't reproduce. I mean, that's not part of the lore, right? They have to like bite you and then you turn into a zombie. So there's what now, 8 billion people on the planet? 9, 10, whatever. There's 9 billion people on the planet. Once like 8.9 billion of us are zombies, then what? Like the zombies start falling apart. We're not going to be like there's not going to be a population boom during a zombie apocalypse because I don't know about you, but zombies don't make me horny. So like
Hey,
eventually the problem just
is
goes
it
away.
everything's a kink for someone?
That's true. Yeah. No kink shaming on this channel.
No.
Not even, bears or
Shout out to the zombie bronies out there.
Ah. So yeah, I don't even know what I would do. What would you do?
Well, it really depends. Like, you have to define some things. So you got 48 hours warning. Does that mean everybody has 48 hours warning, or you have 48 hours warning? Like,
Hmm.
do zombies swim? Like, could I make my way to Hawaii, which is, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, pretty far away from everywhere, and also by one of the world's largest military bases? Like,
Mm.
let's say this thing is starting in Europe, just to throw a place
Ooh,
out there.
ooh, ooh. Here's an idea. A movie idea.
Okay.
Zombies with guns. imagine imagine that you're fighting off zombies, but they're not just zombies, they're zombies who somehow still remember how to shoot guns. So you have like basically Rambo, but one side of the thing is zombies.
I mean, if
It
you
would
if
be
you
an ex
if you read into the satire, they kind of made it. It was called Starship Troopers.
kind of a little bit, yeah. It would be an excuse for why the bad guys couldn't hit anything. Hot take, stormtroopers are actually zombies under the armor.
But okay, let's say that, I zombies probably can't swim across the ocean. I don't know if they can do the walk on the ocean floor thing without, dying a la Pirates of the Caribbean. Like, are island refuges reasonably safe? If so, can I make my way to one of those in 48 hours? If I'm the only one that knows about the problem, like, let's say I caught word of a zombie outbreak as a result of a lab, and we'll call it in Europe this time. If I had inside knowledge that shit was going sideways, like, I could probably book a trip for me and my family and friends to Hawaii. And by the time news spread, I wasn't competing to get there, right? Like,
Yep.
in which case, like, it's a large enough place to be self-sustainable. It's uh remote enough that, like, you're not dealing with like contagion spreading in the air if it's a contagion based zombie situation.
Apologies to our listeners in Hawaii who are sitting there going, "What are you talking about? Hawaii is like full of cities and it has like lots and lots of people in it."
No, no, that's what I mean though. Like, but like, I'm making the assumption that the zombie outbreak is happening in Europe, and I'm looking at mitigation. At some point, the people in Hawaii are going to realize, oh, shit's going down. We're restricting travel. We've got a large military base with the equipment to do that. You know, there's warships all over the place already there that can just surround the island, blockade anything, and like there's a viable population. There's a few other places that you could probably say we're in a similar situation, but they're a lot closer to, sort of mainland populations than somewhere like Hawaii would be. If that wasn't realistic, And it's like, I got 48 hours. Everybody knows, you know, and let's say that there's zombies are in Texas. I'd probably just make my way up north. Like, the thing about Canada is that, like, all of our population is within 100 kilometers or less of the US border.
Yep.
And most of northern Canada, while not always the most hospitable, is incredibly remote.
Yeah.
And I watch enough like primitive
Alone,
surv
Survivor Man.
yeah, I watch enough primitive sort of survival shit that I'm reasonably convinced that, like, in a couple weeks I could have a reasonable sized shelter built up in the trees in northern Canada, and a means of sustaining at least my family and myself. And
Speaking on
well,
behalf of Northern Canada, where I live, there's also quite a few towns up here. Yes, we're a little more spread out and
no,
we have more
that's
space.
I'm not even calling that northern Canada. I'm talking like
Like
north.
none of it.
Yeah, maybe even, yeah. Nunavut, yes. Northern Quebec, yes. Even just northern Ontario in the other direction.
Even Northern Ontario is actually pretty
Yeah,
is like small towns here and there. So
yeah.
Northern Quebec is a thing though. Like I'm across the river from Quebec, and like across the river from here is pardon my French because it's bad. Zone écologique conservation. So
Mm,
we call them the ZECs,
yeah.
ZEC. And it's like thousands of acres of basically just empty wilderness with occasional like, oh, this used to be a plantation back in 1800 when we
Hmm.
first started, the colonial settling of Canada.
But
So
like,
yeah, I mean,
while you're technically northern Ontario there, that's like the middle of Quebec. Like the amount of Quebec that's
yeah,
further north than that.
is ridiculous.
If you've ever looked at a map of Canada, like it's kind of, I don't say this to Canadians, I say this to anybody else that might be listening. The amount of the Ontario population, for instance, that is actually south of a lot of US population is substantial, right? Like you look at everything from Michigan west is actually north in terms of latitude of where most of our population lives in Ontario on the Great Lakes.
Pretty much like something like 75% of the Canadian population can drive to Windsor in less than 2 hours.
Yeah. So, there's we're the second largest country by land area in the
Well,
world. Now, a lot of that is very, very north where like conditions are pretty inhospitable. But there is a lot
getting more
of,
hospitable every year as the planet heats up. Eventually, it's going to be the
well,
tropics, man.
the zombie outbreak will probably fix that for us.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a thing in the news. Actually, Canada has just crossed 40 million people in population. For reference, the United States, the last I heard, had 330 million. So we
Hmm.
have basically 10%, or give or take, of the population of the US. And I think we're twice as big, three times as big by landmass.
No, it depends on if you're including Alaska, because Alaska is just bonkers huge. We're not substantially larger than the US when you include Alaska, but we are larger. But like you're including, everything that is up north,
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
swinging up beside Greenland and whatnot in the Arctic
Well,
Circle.
and,
So it's,
all of the stuff north of the Arctic Circle that is somewhat under contention, and that island that we're at war with Denmark over.
yeah. Yeah. Stefan Milo, I think, did a video on that one. I think I shouted him out as a recommendation in one show. Oh no, it was another channel that I was watching. One that I just started that has like a funny animation style similar to like the Minute Earth and Minute Physics style, just sort of a
Mhm.
whiteboard kind of doodly type thing.
Yeah.
Uh, I'll have to dig it up. So, in terms of how long do I think I could survive, it would certainly depend on the circumstances. Let's say that Hawaii's unreasonable and it's just northern Canada. Honestly, if you can survive long enough to get up there, you're probably going to survive as long as you can without running into a major medical emergency or aren't able to
That's the
find
thing.
sustainable food sources, right?
The funny thing is, like, it depends again on, like, are we talking like movie style zombie apocalypse where you got to fight your way through zombies? In which case, Like,
Well,
I'm
with
not going
48,
anywhere.
that's the thing with 48 hours notice. Like I'm thinking that like we can avoid that situation.
Maybe yes and maybe no. But if you think about okay, like you're gonna like go like hardcore prepper for 48 hours. You know, I'm gonna hunker down, you know, and fence off my town. Like what's his name in Last of Us?
Hmm.
Like, could I do that in 48 hours? No. If I get into that situation where like I have to, you know, fight my way through zombies, then I give my odds at like 10%. Like, just it's not.
10% to get
I'm
through the first hour.
yeah. You
Yeah.
know, like it's you know, I have few illusions about my ability to move quickly or to be violent as necessary, and I'm not going anywhere without my wife, you know, and she just had two knees replaced, so we're not running ever, right? It's like if it's fast zombies, we're screwed. If it's slow zombies, then, you know, it's like having an accident at 10 miles an hour on black ice. You
Hmm.
know, where you can roll down the window and say to your neighbors, "Yep, I'm having an accident. We're about to crash. It's going to happen any minute now." That would be me running from slow zombies. It's like I'm
Yeah.
not getting away. They're not getting any closer either.
Yeah. And that'd be the tough thing because, like, uh, my wife, for instance, has several medications that she requires. Now, um, a lot of them are just to deal with side effects of other medications, so she could probably survive without them, but it'd be
But
kind of
yeah,
touch and
uncomfortable.
go.
Yeah.
So, just abandoning an area without, like, I guess I got 40 hours maybe, or 48 hours I can knock off a like a drugstore or something. But so
Yeah,
like, give me all your insulin. Like,
there was a movie that I recommended, and heaven help me if I can remember it, but that was actually kind of the premise of the movie. Was a guy walking along, picked up a payphone. He went on a first date, and on his way home, he was like, "Yeah, I had a good first date." And a payphone rings, so he picks it up, and it's a guy from some military base who thought he was calling his dad. Warns him of an impending nuclear war. Um, I've recommended this a bunch of times, and uh, it's like a love story during nuclear war, and it's basically this is the premise of the movie: is this guy has 48 hours notice,
oh,
24 hours notice, and he goes around trying to warn people, and some people believe him, and some people don't. And what's her name from Seinfeld? Was it Ellen? What was her name?
Elaine,
What's the actor?
Julie
Elaine.
Louise Dreyfus. Yeah,
Yes, she was in it.
I have no idea
She
what you're talking about, man.
uh she has a podcast apparently, or at least that's what Google is telling me. Nuclear war movie.
3 hours later.
It's called Miracle Mile, and it had Anthony Edwards starred in it. When was this? 1980 something? 1988. A young man hears a chance phone call telling him that nuclear war has started and missiles will hit his city in 70 minutes. Okay, so I was wrong. He's basically got an hour's warning, right? And the whole movie is about him struggling to A, convince people that it's real, and B, try and find a way to get places. And he does actually convince some people, uh, and like arrange a helicopter, and they're gonna fly to Alaska. But there's just like this sequence of events is what I imagine would happen. All of the ancillary stuff that happens as you're trying to figure out a way to survive is actually what makes the interesting story.
Hmm.
So the zombie portion of it is actually kind of boring. It's like, zombies, whatever. It's all of the okay, what else do we have to do in order to survive as the zombies are approaching? Anyway, I would highly recommend watching Miracle Mile. It's a cheesy 80s movie, but it's got lots of really good character moments in it.
Well, we'll have to check it out. Let's get into parting gifts, and we'll call that your first one then.
And I show you
All
how
right.
deep the rabbit hole goes.
Anybody want a peanut?
Miracle Mile.
Yes.
Watch it.
Anthony Edwards' vehicle.
All right, you've actually mentioned a couple of things in the show notes.
I have. Yeah. Electro Swing Radio, which I may have mentioned before, is a like 1920s, 1930s swing music set to modern kind of dance hall beats. You know, it's ooms, except with more of a swing vibe to it. They have an app that is actually available for Android. I have no idea about Apple. They also have a website, you know, available generally speaking on YouTube in various places. So check that out. It's pretty cool. Your talk of books actually reminded me of a thing called the Baen Free Library, which is a place where Baen Books puts like sort of the first book of a series that isn't selling well or is out of print. Here it is. It's free. Read the first one. First one's free. Then you got to pay.
Very
There's
nice.
some things that are like just like the whole series is up, and some of it's good stuff. Some of it's kind of pulp, but that's what Baen Books does a lot of. It's there and it's free, and you can just go read it.
Very nice. My recommendation this week is a dude by the name of Milo Rossi. His YouTube channel is Mini Minuteman, and I've been binging his stuff. My wife's been watching a lot of it with me. He's a young, uh, like an archaeologist, but archaeologist turned content creator. His channel has a lot of legit sort of archaeology stuff. Like he just finished a tour of Turkey, so there was interesting stuff about a few sites there: Haran, Göbekli Tepe. Um, but he also does a lot of kind of funny. Like I'm in the middle of a series right now where he's basically going through all of the Graham Hancock Ancient Apocalypse series on Netflix. Graham Hancock is fairly well known, like pseudo archaeologist, and he's just ripping them apart in sort of an
I don't want to
amusing,
say it was
entertaining way.
aliens, but
Yeah,
aliens.
not quite that bad, but just a little bit better than that kind of quality stuff. But it's still, it boils down to the idea is it's you look back and all of our sort of big developments come from this ancient uh culture of humans that lived 12,000 years ago, Atlanteans or whatever, and you
The
look at
electrum cap on the pyramid generated electricity, and it's a true fact. You can look it up. Do your own research.
yeah. Anyway, he does that. He also does a lot of like YouTube shorts where he just starts dunking on and debunking a lot of like TikTok kind of pseudo archaeology stuff. But he is legit as well, and he does a lot of real archaeology. He's actually, I think, leading a group into Peru coming up, and he's going to do a lot of coverage of that on his YouTube channel too. Just a young dude. His production quality is kind of trash for a lot of his stuff, but it's easy enough to overlook. He's charismatic, entertaining. He's not what you think of when you think sort of archaeologist. He's just this kind of punk kid,
Well,
but
I think
he's
about
really good.
I think about guys in leather jackets and funky hats and with carrying a whip.
Yeah, no,
That's what I
he's
think
not
of
even
when
that either. He's somewhere between like theater arts student and
the librarian.
yeah. No, just anyway, check him out. Milo Rossi, Mini Minuteman is the name of his YouTube channel. And I think that's all I've got today. I was going to try and find the name of that other channel I was referencing that did the whiteboard doodle style stuff, but I don't have it offhand. And I'm not going to waste 7.5 hours looking for it. Do you have anything else you
Come
want to
on,
talk about
man. It's
today?
like such riveting content. You know what? It would be kind of just off the cuff and 2 drinks in. This seems like a good idea, and it's probably terrible. Can you imagine like a live stream of just somebody's Google searches for the day? or you edit out kind of the blank space in between, but it's literally just what are they searching for? What are they actually searching for? What pops up in the suggested things that they actually follow down the rabbit hole? I don't know. I think it would be riveting for about 8.5 seconds.
Hell of an 8.5 seconds, though. Do we really?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, open up Google and look at your most recent searches and tell me if you still think it's a good idea.
I don't even have to go that far, but I do think that it would be an interesting sort of gambling or drinking game to try and how long does it take before they start searching for porn?
I mean, Google's not where you go for that, so probably a while. I'd bet it'd be a while.
I mean, you can search for boobies in Google and it'll give you boobies.
It's true. It's just like the least efficient way to do it.
Don't need efficiency. I handle the efficiency on my own.
Yes. You said it'd be good for 7.5 minutes. What are we going to do with the other 6 minutes and 45 seconds?
I mean, that's just the foreplay.
Good night, Telson.
Yeah, I think that's probably a wrap.